Welcome to Breathe California TV. My name is Terry Trumbull. Twice a year, as a professor at San Jose State, I get to bring my students here to do presentations that they're required to do for advanced classes. So the next 4 weeks, you're going to see energy experts talking to us. So today we have Vivian Ho is going to talk about climate change, and Shail Kumar is going to talk about ANWR. And if you don't know what that is, hang around and we'll let you know. So energy is the dominant issue of our time in Breathe California. We worry about it because burning energy affects your health. 95% of us in California are breathing unhealthy air, and the only way to solve that is to quit burning things. We'll be back to talk with our guests more in 30 seconds.
My name is Rene Montez. I've been using the CPAP machine, I would guess 10 years. I got so accustomed to it, I don't go anywhere without it. I take it with me everywhere. From the moment I put it on, I thought it was the greatest thing because the breathing was a lot easier, and after using it for a couple nights, I felt a lot of energy. Breathe California is fabulous.
So I'd have to agree with that. It's the first time I've seen that public service announcement, but I've been involved with Breathe California since 1973. Like most health organizations, Breathe California's resources, where they get funding, is generally to help people with breathing difficulties. Last year, just in Santa Clara County, they helped 100,000 people with breathing difficulties. But the focus of this show has almost always been on prevention. So today we're going to have Vivian Ho and Shail Kumar talking to us about different aspects of our energy problems, which once they get turned into energy from fossil fuels, become a pretty serious health problem for us. So Vivian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Terry. So today I'm here to talk about carbon capture and sequestration, and that is a really important tool that we have against fighting climate change and for having cleaner, healthier air, because typically when we have a coal or natural gas power plant, they spew all their pollution and also carbon dioxide out into the atmosphere. But with carbon capture sequestration technology, we can take some of that carbon either directly from the exhaust from the plants or from the atmosphere and sequester it underground, typically 2,500 feet below ground in saline formations under impermeable rock and things like that.
So what does sequester mean?
So sequester means to store it and just make sure it never gets back out into the atmosphere ever again. And we can put that really deep underground or in depleted oil reservoirs like that, so that we can keep all the carbon just underground, sticking to the rocks and and even like unminable coal seams, things like that. They'll really stick to the carbon dioxide and make sure that it never gets back into the atmosphere, into our lungs.
So I apologize for interrupting, but when you say storing underground, let's talk about each of these and then come back to the rest. So what we're talking about is if I drive south on I-5 heading towards LA, there's this enormous area around Bakersfield where they pump oil. So
Right.
Last results, we're 1/3, in other words, we're third in generating fossil fuel amongst the states. So what would we do with those deposits as they run out in Bakersfield?
So we could pump more carbon dioxide that we capture from the air into these fossil fuel beds. And this is called EOR, or Enhanced Oil Recovery. And some of the dregs of the last oil in there will come up and will be able to be used.
So
And
not only are we storing carbon dioxide, but we're getting more oil out of the deposit.
yes, more efficiently.
And what about saline? Most of us don't think of seawater, saline water, as a spot where you'd want to store carbon dioxide.
Right. So It wouldn't be dumped straight out into the ocean because then it would just bubble back up again, just like soda water or club soda. But if you have a deep enough formation of salt water under the ground, under 2,500 feet, then this is a really optimal place to store carbon because aquifers under the ground, it's not like a water bottle buried under the ground. It's very porous rock that's full of this salt water, and typically they have an impermeable rock layer above it. And so if we drill down into the aquifer and store the carbon there, then it's trapped under the rock layer above, and it's also so far down that it's liquidized, and it's a lot more stable that way.
So why do we care about stability?
We care about stability because we don't want the carbon to come back up into the atmosphere. We want it to stay there. We don't want it to affect our water or heaven forbid explode. If it was just pressurized gas just a couple feet under the surface, that would be really dangerous. But what we're talking about is half a mile under the earth, super deep. All of the rock is pushing down on it and just keeping it compressed there.
Absolutely wonderful. So you mentioned this at the start. We're still burning fossil fuel here, in this case probably
Yes.
coal, but a little bit of natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
Does this get rid of all the problems?
No. So the CCS technology is pretty sensitive, and it doesn't really work on power plants that don't have other scrubbers that are cleaning the exhaust as well, because it can only absorb carbon dioxide. Otherwise, it gets all messed up. So with a CCS plant, sometimes they piggyback on the power plants and just clamp right onto the exhaust, and so you actually get a zero emission plant. But the technology to be economically effective isn't always 100% efficient. So some things will still leak out. So it's not a 100% fix. But there are some CCS plants like the Global Thermostat plant in Menlo Park that take carbon dioxide directly from the air. So it's not burning anything, it's just taking in carbon dioxide.
Yeah, and so the whole point, just reiterate, it's taking carbon dioxide out of the air. Why are we doing that?
So carbon dioxide needs to come out of the air because it's the biggest contributor to climate change. And even if we, get all renewable energy, zero emission cars, all solar on all of our houses, the earth will still continue to warm because of all the carbon that we've already put there. So what we need to focus on is taking it out.
So this is a little far afield for you, but I had a student say to me the other day, oh, we don't need to worry about this problem because in 100 years we'll quit using fossil fuels. And that doesn't work because of what?
Economics and politics. The fossil fuel industry is so big and so powerful that we couldn't possibly in our wildest dreams hope to just shut them down in a very short amount of time, a couple years or anything like that. It sounds very pessimistic, but there's really no way for us to just switch directly to renewable energy. And so with this technology, we can sort of mitigate the problems that they're causing.
So to phrase it a little bit differently, let's say that I'm Mr. Magic, and by 2030 we get rid of burning all fossil fuels, cars, power plants, you name it, any sort of way.
That would
Are
be
we-
so cool.
Yes. Well, let's follow up on that. Will it be cool? Does that mean that our climate change problems go away, or do we need some time for a reduction in the CO2 levels?
So even if we just magically stopped emitting all greenhouse gases today, the Earth would still continue warming because the CO2 that's already in the atmosphere would trap solar heat in our air, and we would still have melting ice caps, changing the reflectivity of the Earth's surface. So there's still going to be warming that's going to happen. If we cut off all of our emissions, it would eventually come back down, but what we're talking about is way into the future when it would start stabilizing again. And so we need to really be proactive about taking the carbon out and reducing the actual level of carbon in the atmosphere, not just stopping how much we put into it, because it's already there.
So say the same thing, in the 200 years since the Industrial Revolution started, we don't turn that around, stop burning things and having it disappear from the air.
Right, it doesn't disappear. We would just kind of be at a standstill at the level that we're at now, but we wouldn't be coming back down to the natural level of carbon in the atmosphere.
So if everybody in this area was perfect and wasn't creating any CO2, we'd still want one of these plants that would pull carbon out of the air to reduce the impact on us from sea level change and other things.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. We wouldn't want to just stay where we are, because there's already processes at work that climate change has set into motion that we couldn't stop just by being perfect.
So the second segment of this show, we're going to talk with Shail Kumar about whether it's good to drill for oil in a wildlife refuge. Is there anything about these sequestration techniques that would be inconsistent with being in a national park or something like that?
So with a lot of sequestration techniques that use EOR, I find that this is a better way to get oil than drilling in an already pristine area, like a wildlife refuge, because you're taking land that's already been degraded. It's already been drilled, been pumped, and you're just kind of draining the last few drops from it. And that, I feel, is a more optimal way of getting fossil fuels, if we have to at all.
Yeah,
Then,
like the oil fields that I mentioned in Bakersfield. If you've driven
Yes.
down there, it's hard to figure a better use for them than sequestering carbon.
absolutely.
So what do you think of this? 45 years ago, everybody said there are two great things that we need to have happen. One is fusion power, so that we quit burning fossil fuels, and the second is clean coal. Is this going to give us clean coal to sequester all the carbon?
So it's cleaner coal. It's not perfect. We have to scrub all the exhaust from toxins, and then those toxins have to go somewhere. We have to store them somewhere. So it's still not perfect, but I think that we're already very far from perfect. We're very far from where we want to be, and this would be a little bit like a step in the right direction.
So to rephrase that, we may not want to burn coal, but we've got an awful lot of CO2 that needs to be pulled out of the air no matter what the technique is for generating energy.
Right.
So we've been talking with Vivian Ho about ways that we can lessen climate change problems. We're going to switch over to talking with Shail Kumar for the next 15-minute segment about whether it makes sense to drill for oil in wildlife refuges. See you in 30 seconds.
The different therapeutic methods that we can help are very low socioeconomic status clients who have no alternatives, no anything, and there's still about 15 different resources we got out of this, that if you have no resources, no service connection, you can still get aid.
That they are connected, one encourages the other, and that the process of change from backing off from the tobacco is the same as backing off from any other addictive drug.
Everyone can benefit from this training that we just were offered today. I would not take it back.
Welcome back. This is Breathe California TV. I hope you enjoy the public service announcements, which talk about the many programs that Breathe California has. They're focused on helping people stop tobacco smoke, which is just about the worst thing that you can do for your health. And we're going to be focusing more on the 90% of health issues that occur for everybody that doesn't smoke, which is air pollution. So about 3 years ago, the regional head of EPA made the following statement. 87% of us feel like the health problems with air pollution need to be addressed. And 85% of the people in this country feel like we need to work on alternative energy and conservation to resolve our energy problems. But for climate change, which we just talked about with Vivian Ho, it was only about 50%. And the recent presidential election shows everybody just how divided we are as a country and flip-flopping from policies. So Shaila Kumar is here to talk about one of the most controversial that will be addressed in the next year in front of Congress. So Shaila, welcome.
Hi. So I'm presenting on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and it was set aside in the 1960s by Eisenhower, and he set aside about 10 million acres in the upper area of Alaska to keep it pristine wildlife, and it was extended to 19.5 million acres by Carter a few years later, and just recently in 2015, Obama set aside 10 million acres that will forever never be touched. It's going to be permanently protected. So the controversy right now is there is the Trans-Alaskan pipeline. As you can see, it's going
It's
from
a red line. It's hard to see, but it's down here to Valdez.
Yeah, so it's about 800 miles, and it's actually only at 1/4 production right now. So what's happening is the less oil that's being pushed through the pipeline, the more chances there are for corrosion, because the oil has more of a chance to freeze and the water separates, and it just causes rust, and it's a lot of engineering.
And oxygen's in there
Yeah.
that wouldn't be there if the pipeline was full.
Yeah. So what the controversy is oil companies, they want to start drilling in the protected area to bring up the production rates so that the pipeline won't corrode as fast, and so that there would be more revenue coming in for Alaska. And there would be a lot of environmental damages like for the wildlife, but Alaskans are still in support. About 78% of Alaskans are in support of the drilling the pipeline because it would bring in revenue for their state. But I still don't think it's very worth it to drill in a
Well,
wildlife refuge.
expand on that. Is it because there's lots of jobs, they think, that come from this?
So the drilling in ANWR, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, it's projected to bring about 10,000 jobs nationally. But the issue with that is how long lasting would these jobs be? When would they get laid off? Because I mean, the oil will run out eventually, as it is in the other areas that they're drilling in.
So in energy policy, we talk about the difference between capital when you're building things and maintenance. When you say 10,000 jobs, is that just on the construction side of things, or after you've drilled the wells, are there going to still be a lot of jobs?
It wasn't very clear during my research, but it said 10,000 jobs nationally, so I'm sure it would be during the construction, the maintenance, and also the demolition eventually. And also in other parts of the country where the oil would be exported to, that would also create jobs.
So historically, Alaska's had an oil extraction tax, and so the citizens get a lot of tax money off of that. Do we have that in California?
No, we don't.
We're the only state that doesn't. And we've been told time and time again by the oil companies that the price of gas will have to go up, but we'll let everybody decide. But that seems to be a reason Alaskans are very fond of this. I mean, after all, there's still 700,000 to 800,000 people there, and their interest seems to be more in getting the revenue so they can reduce their income taxes.
And Alaska, they actually get about 85% of their revenue for their state from oil companies and from the drilling that's been going on there. And another thing is policy analysts are saying that if ANWR was to be drilled, it would reduce the cost of oil significantly, and it would reduce our dependence on foreign oil significantly. But there's approximately projected to be 10 billion barrels of oil in ANWR right now, but the U.S. uses 18 million gallons of oil a day.
So the two numbers don't convert, but I gather you're turning this into, gosh, this isn't much oil.
No, it's not, because I did the math, and so the amount of oil that's projected to be in there, which isn't, it's maybe about 85% correct, according to the surveys that were done. It would only last Americans, for how much we're using daily, it would only last us 555 days, which is only a year and a half worth of what we're consuming at the rate today. So I don't think it's really worth it to be tapping into pristine wildlife areas.
Well, let's explore some of the other areas. So it comes out at Valdez, which obviously is famous for the oil spills associated with. Does all that oil go to the United States?
From Valdez?
Yeah.
No.
The reason I'm asking is when we built the pipeline in 1974, all the oil was required to go to the U.S., but President Reagan changed that, and most of the oil is going to Japan, Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, who don't have oil. So the discovery that you're talking about doesn't necessarily even go to the U.S.
That's true.
So talk a little bit about the policies in place. What other things do we have? Like, what is the purpose of a wildlife refuge, and why is Congress involved with this decision?
So when Eisenhower, when he protected that area of ANWR, it was under the Alaskan national, it's called ANILCA, and so he set aside about 10 million acres of that wildlife. So the problem right now is if the oil companies were to start drilling in ANWR, Congress would have to approve something that is already, like, the law is
It's currently
to protect it.
prohibited.
Yeah.
Because it's, so what are we using this place for now?
The ANWR?
Yeah.
It's the National Wildlife Refuge.
Yeah, we're using it to protect wildlife.
Yeah.
The whole point is. And so tell us a little bit about this pipeline. Who owns it, and have there been any problems?
So it's the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline. There's about 400 spills annually. That's more than one spill a day. There's a lot of oil coming out of that, and unfortunately a lot of it hasn't been reported on unless you actually go and do the research. The oil spills are really detrimental to the environment. A lot of the wildlife can be damaged, and the pristine habitats, it's just going to go downhill.
And the owner of the pipeline is BP.
Yeah.
And is there anything else famous that they screwed up on and seem to don't care about oil?
They have had oil spills, and even though there's a lot of money being spent to clean it, it's only a small percentage of what their revenue is.
Yeah, so Deepwater Horizon, the movie that was out this fall about this is a BP site, the worst oil well explosion. And they've been lambasted for being pretty wretched at protecting the environment. I think Alaskans clearly want the revenue. So what other environmental damage could you talk about?
So if there was to be drilling in ANWR, there would need to be a lot of infrastructure built for housing the employees that would be there, sewage treatment plants. There would be a lot of helicopters to monitor the area, and roads would need to be built to transport the oil, and so that would
Across a wildlife refuge.
yes. So that would
Yeah.
definitely drive away a lot of the wildlife, and it would affect the Alaskans that live there. And the Alaskans that live there, they live off of hunting. That's how they get their food. And so the building of all this infrastructure for the oil would definitely, it would scare off a lot of their food, pretty much.
Well, we had an expert talking about climate change earlier in the show. Do you have any reactions after hearing Vivian's presentation on how this should fit in, or are there better ways to do things?
Well, her presentation was on how we should take carbon out of the atmosphere, which I think is definitely what should be done. And I really don't think we should be drilling for any more fossil fuels. Even though it's there, it's in a wildlife refuge, there's a reason that it is being protected. So I think that the technology she was talking about, the carbon sequestration, is perfect, but I still don't think we should be emitting any more carbon at the same time while we're trying to bring the carbon from the atmosphere out. I don't think more should be emitted.
So we haven't even talked about, under environmental damage, what happens once it reaches Valdez. Any famous episodes that would give us a hint?
So in Valdez, there was the Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989. So there was a lot of oil that was spilled out, and it affected about 1,300 miles of shoreline. It took about 4 summers for it to be cleared up, and I believe it was being cleaned in the summers because that's when the snow melts and it's easier for the people that go out there to clean. But it's still not fully cleaned.
Yeah, the ecosystem hasn't, and so we're paying higher prices and have less fish from Alaska because of that. So Vivian, we got about 30 seconds. I didn't really give you any wrap-up time. Do you have any final words of wisdom for us on today's topics?
Yeah, I think the way that we approach climate change needs to be a very holistic view. So it's not just reducing our emissions, it's also taking carbon out of the atmosphere. It's not just, when we look at policy that's affecting carbon capture sequestration, it's not just funding projects, but also making it enticing for the private sector to actually put these like retrofits on their old power plants or just make new ones.
So Vivian and Child, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in to join us. See you next week with another great show.